Welcome back, everybody, to Let's Talk Toku, your number one show for all different types of tokusatsu topics. We're starting it off a little bit easy. We've gone over the introduction of tokusatsu, and we've gone over the TV throwdown of Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and Ultraman. I'm Squall Charlson, and I'm your host, and today we have such an awesome guest that's going to be coming into this studio to present to you guys an episode all about Godzilla. I'm talking about Matt Frank. We did get Matt Frank, right? Wait.
I'm in a laptop, apparently.
Yeah.
One might say a ghost in a machine. I don't recommend it.
No, one star out of 5?
0.3?
I
don't know.
I guess you're in the computer. You can do whatever you want.
Yes. I'm in the algorithm. I am the algorithm now.
Well, welcome to the show. This is Let's Talk Toku. Everybody, this is Matt Frank. If you're not familiar, Matt, do you want to kind of give us up to speed with who you are and what you do in the community?
Well, I am a comic book artist by trade. That would be the overall description. But I also would say that I'm an illustrator and a concept artist and a character designer. I've also done a fair bit of writing. And yeah, the big thing I'm best known for is Godzilla. I worked for IDW Publishing on their Godzilla comics for the duration that they had the license, and they were creating new comics, which was 2010 to 2016. Mm-hmm. And I worked on almost every book they put out, either doing covers or I did a fair amount of interiors, especially on Godzilla Rulers of Earth. There was one or two miniseries that I didn't work on, but I know my way around a big lizard. And in addition to that, I've done some covers for the Power Rangers comics. I've done a lot of Transformers stuff for IDW and Fun Publications. Mm-hmm. I recently did some Gamera. I did some Ultraman. I did Redman the Kaiju Hunter, which is my most recent graphic novel work. And I designed the main monster in Asylum's Monster Island, available now on DVD and Blu-ray, I think.
Maybe.
Lord of the Monsters, as it was called in Japan, because, screw it, right? But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
I think we were talking earlier, too, one of the coolest things about what you do, and I think this is your words more than what I would say, but you were influenced as a kid by these heroes, by everything. What exactly were you saying with that?
Well, I was basically saying that I was getting the reins of just about every major franchise that I worshipped as a child, mm-hmm. and just trying to make my mark on it in some way, or just be involved in it in some way, because those things I liked as a kid deeply affected me as into my adult years, especially creatively.
Right.
Anything that creatively inspires me, I just try to be involved on some level. And for me, that just happened to be a lot of these Japanese franchises, because, as I am fond of saying, a lot of people from our generation and on were basically raised by Japan. Mm-hmm. Like our video games, our toys, our comic books, our cartoons were almost all of them were Japanese. Mm-hmm. So there you go. And so it's only natural that you would be inspired by that stuff if you were a creative person. So yeah, that is that. I mean, I'm very thrilled to be working with Tsuburaya recently on Ultraman and their properties as well. And I'm actually still working on Godzilla stuff, even though IDW isn't producing new Godzilla books. I still do Godzilla stuff occasionally for my publisher in Japan, which is Phase 6. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
I think it's so cool that you are now drawing a lot of these characters that you were inspired by as a kid, and now will inspire the next wave of artists of right. all sorts of varieties, like drawing, writing, producing.
That means a lot to hear, because as I've said often before, I try never to have a big head about my work. I try to stay grounded. I try not to get too highfalutin or too big for my britches, but it reminds me whenever I talk to other people who are inspired by my work, even younger people who tell me that they grew up on my work. it reminds me that what I'm doing on some level matters, and that I remember I've had more than a few conversations at conventions with parents who, don't get it.
Right.
And although in fairness, it's really cool that they're there and they're with their kids and they want to be there because their kids, are into this stuff. Mm-hmm. But every now and then you'll get a parent who's like, how do I put this? They'll be like, well, this is just something you do for fun, right? And it's like, and
it's
I'm
a way
like,
of life.
The old axiom, I don't even know if axiom is the word I want to use, but if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Sure, yeah.
That is such a massive crock. You will never work harder at anything than what you love doing. Mm-hmm. Because that's the thing that keeps you going, and that's the thing that makes you want to be as good as you can at it.
Right, and kind of push you to make it better and kind of become a better person and a artist because of it.
Yes, absolutely.
So now is our Godzilla episode, and Matt, I'm so sorry. I have seen maybe 5 Godzilla films in my entire life from start to finish, so I am not a wealth of information here. So hopefully
we're all very disappointed in you. We're very disappointed in you. Look at him. Anyway, yeah.
The best thing I think that having you on this show, obviously you have the perfect surroundings, the perfect knowledge of all of this, is that there may be some other people watching that maybe want to get into Godzilla, that maybe haven't really experienced the whole kaiju kick yet. And I think kind of having both of us here will create a good middle ground for people watching. No. I'm always thrilled when I get the opportunity to explain Godzilla to people, because while I don't consider myself necessarily a high level authority, like there are people that I know personally who far outstrip my knowledge. I know guys who have written books like the thing is that I grew up reading and listening to commentary tracks by this wealth of Godzilla experts, and these were guys who back in the day, if you wanted to know about this stuff, you had to go to Japan to really learn about this stuff. If you were lucky in the States, you get a copy of Famous Monsters of Filmland or something that has like Japan's monsters, and it'll have like 67 to 80% accurate information, which has only gotten, in some ways it's gotten easier and harder in recent years because the internet has made connectivity so easy. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, a lot of the people who worked on the original films are, a lot of them have passed on. There's not a lot of them left. Mm-hmm. One of the only major creative forces attached to the original film is Akira Takarada. He was the actor who was he was a young naval officer Ogata in the original film, and he's still around. I'm actually friends with his son and daughter-in-law, which makes you really happy. That's awesome.
I'm thrilled to talk about it. Maybe
someone watching this right now will have kind of the same influence and push it when they get old and they start working on stuff or I should say get older.
I didn't say anything, but yeah.
So let's draw it back a little bit. Let's go back to 54 with 54. The first Godzilla film. What inspired this? Like, where did this come from? Like, I'm pretty up to date on like Eiji Tsuburaya and kind of his sort of role that he had in bringing this to life, and sort of the amazing work that makes this such a testimonial to how well these movies were made. But yeah, please fill in wherever you can. Like, where did this movie come from? Why was this such a thing that led into this huge like monster craze?
It was the genesis of what was later known in the 60s as the monster boom in Japan, where every major studio was trying to get in on this monsterific mayhem. But in the 50s, at that time, no one in Japan had really done something like that. There were a couple of King Kong style, like kind of cheapy movies that were made. those are mostly lost to time, though. There was like King Kong appears in Edo, which was like a samurai era King Kong movie, but it might have even been a comedy.
What?
I'm not sure, and a lot of people aren't sure because, again, a lot of that stuff is lost.
Right.
We lost a lot of stuff post-war Japan, after all the fire bombings and things like that, which is one of the reasons why Godzilla is so important, because Godzilla is not just a monster movie. It's a reflection of the times it was created in. And to quote Movies with Mikey, the genre as a whole, the kaiju genre, is trying to make sense of the world around us. It's trying to compartmentalize trauma. That's where the genre came from. The original Godzilla was actually created because the producer Tomoyuki Tanaka essentially needed a production to fill a hole in his schedule. He was a producer working at Toho. They had a film project set in Indonesia that was supposed to be an Indonesian-Japanese co-production, but unfortunately, because there was still a lot of anti-Japanese sentiment in Indonesia at the time, the production was canceled, and all the staff apparently had all their green cards revoked or something. It was a big to-do. Yeah. Bad. So Tanaka had to hop the next plane back to Japan, and the apocryphal rumor is that as he was flying back, he was sort of looking out over the ocean and he wondered like what could be under the deep or whatever. But what's more likely, he was aware of the monster movies that were starting to pop up in America, like The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And of course, King Kong was this giant legendary film. Even in Japan, like King Kong has a lot of fans. He decided we should make an honest attempt at a monster movie. So Tanaka and Toho at large, they managed to get a lot of great resources together. They got Eiji Tsuburaya, as you had mentioned, and Tsuburaya had cut his teeth on war films, which actually got him blacklisted by the occupational forces. He was also a big airplane guy. Like when he was younger, he dreamed of piloting airplanes. So his footage of Japanese bombers, attacking, these aren't bombers, but of Japanese bombers attacking ships and stuff was mistaken as actual war footage by American film archivists, which is a testament to his abilities. Right. And of course, as a director, they hired Ishiro Honda, who was a contemporary of Akira Kurosawa. In fact, Honda actually co-directed and second unit directed in several of Kurosawa's films, including Seven Samurai, I believe. Whoa. Yeah, there's actually one of my favorite quotes from Kurosawa is the two of them like to use a lot of the same actors. In fact, a lot of Kurosawa actors tend to appear in a lot of Godzilla movies and vice versa. Kurosawa wasn't exclusive to Toho, though. He wasn't a company man the way that Honda was. He would go and he would try to get actors to sign on with his films. And he didn't like taking no for an answer. Like he was the kind of guy who would be like, no, I need you for this movie. But every now and then he would go to an actor who would say, I'm sorry, I can't work with you. I'm working on a film for Honda. And that's the only time Kurosawa would say, oh, well, if it's Honda, it must be good. So go on. Like they were apparently really, really good friends. If it did not have this humanistic angle, this anti-war angle, I don't think we would be celebrating 65 years of Godzilla, because his troop, his battalion, whatever the term is, was made to walk through Hiroshima on the way back to Japan. And it was essentially like a shock and awe thing. And that also really deeply affected him. On top of all that, you have the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident, which are you at all familiar with that?
Is that where they did the bombing off of the coast or something? Am I anywhere close? Yeah. No. You got a pretty good handle on it. The Bikini Atoll, which actually is where the word bikini comes from, was a small group of islands in the Pacific that the American military used for a test of, I believe, the first American hydrogen bomb. They didn't tell anyone they were doing this test. And as a result, the Japanese, they were told, don't go in this area. We're doing drills or something. Right. If you want to know a more comprehensive history of the film,
go listen to the commentary tracks on the Criterion Godzilla 54 disc. Those are excellent commentary tracks by David Callett. Anyway, the single Japanese fishing boat, they didn't ignore the order, but they basically like kind of went up and around. Like they were like, we're not going to go in the restricted area, but none of the other boats are out because of this order. So we're going to go out because all the fish will be ours for the taking.
They got their toes wet a little bit.
And ergo, the test happened, but they didn't know how the wind was going to affect the fallout.
Yeah.
The boat got doused in fallout, and when the captain realized that his crew was vomiting, there goes Godzilla. When the captain realized his crew was vomiting and there was like this sticky ash that was starting to fall on the boat, he was like, I better go back to harbor. Yeah, and I think one of them died right after getting back, and it was this huge like international incident. Like the Japanese were like, oh my God, we're being bombed again. We're being used as tests or whatever. And Honda said, we need to take that and focus it inwards into our film.
Sure.
Which is actually very interesting because at the time, when the film finally came out and it had all these overtones of nuclear apocalypse, several newspapers at the time actually thought the movie was quite tasteless for doing that. They kind of shook their canes, so to speak, or turning it into essentially a fantasy film or a science fiction film. But as I said, kaiju films especially are how we process the world. It's how we process the world we live in. I'm very curious to see what kind of kaiju films are going to be made in the next couple of years, given everything that's been going on.
Right.
So.
Welcome back, everybody, to Let's Talk Toku. We have been discussing Godzilla with the one, the only, Matt Frank. And, Matt, I have a challenge for you.
A challenge?
A challenge, sir. We are going to play a little game to see who is the better artist.
Oh, are we now?
If you're down.
I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. I little rough around the edges, so to speak. It's been so long.
I've been practicing.
It's been 20 minutes, a half hour since I last drew something. So I don't know, man.
I think the last time I drew something was for like a YouTube video like 2 years ago.
Does he have horns? I feel like he has horns. And then he's got like the little Gosei symbol here. That's Hibiki.
I had my intern make a bunch of selections that we are going to pick from. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, good to know.
So we have 3 categories. We have the blue, which are the heads. Okay, so the blues are the heads. There are 5 options there. We have the yellows, which are going to be for the torsos, correct?
The body.
The body, yeah. And then the greens, we have, 7 of these?
Yes.
Are going to be modifiers. And what's going to happen is we are going to pick... I'm going to pick one from the head. You're going to pick one from the body, and then we'll both decide on a green one. Or maybe you get a green one and I get a green one, and then we see how that goes. But we're going to draw our own kaiju.
I'm going to go with me. I'm going to go 4 because that's my birthday.
4? Okay. So I will put that one to the side right there.
All right.
All right. Now for the yellows, for the bodies, I'm going to pick number 1. That's how we do it, number 1. And now for the green, what do you feel? 1 through 7. What should we do?
I'm gonna go with lucky number 7 personally.
Okay, lucky number 7. That one's gonna be. Should we do the same ones each, or should we do different ones?
I think it'd be fun if you had a different one.
It'd be fun if I had a different one. Okay, I'm gonna do 4 because that is unfortunately like my lucky number. Like I try to get away from 4, but it always it's a little sweet fun. Okay, so we are gonna have 5 minutes here to draw this kaiju. So for the head, we picked number 4, which was a lion. So we need to draw a lion for our kaiju's head. I chose number 1 for the body, and
What's it say? Come on.
The body of our kaiju will be a Blu-ray box set of a TV show. And now for our modifier. So it has to be aligned with the body of a Blu-ray box set of a TV show. So Matt, your modifier for yours is going to be number 7, which is works part-time at a fast food chain. And mine, number 4, is going to be crab claws.
Oh, you got the good one.
Is that like Santa
crab
Claus?
That's like the easiest one.
Are you ready, Matt?
Ready.
Are you ready to suffer a humiliating defeat on Let's Talk Toku?
Sure. Sure. Whatever you say, buddy.
Just to reiterate, we're doing a kaiju with a lion head, the body of a Blu-ray box set of a TV show, and Matt is going to be drawing his that works part-time at a fast food chain, and mine will have crab claws. All right.
Crab claws for a crab monster.
Oh yeah, I think he's already going.
Oh, he's already gone. Okay, I'm going.
Go.
No.
I'm
going now, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think he's already going.
I may have to Google what a lion looks like.
You don't know what a lion looks like?
I know what a lion, like I can close my eyes and see a lion, but...
It's a Blu-ray box set. Smart ass put that in the pile.
That would be Steve Sakai.
Yep. Checks out.
To be fair, the only normal one was bear.
Bear? Well, I want to know... yeah, well, I mean, we'll talk about what some of the other ones are.
All right. This is the best lion you will see all your life.
You know, it sounds like someone's casting some checks their butt can't something or other. I don't know. How does it go?
Can't cash.
Your mouth's writing checks.
My butt's cashing checks that my mouth doesn't.
Your butt's cashing checks that your ass can't what?
Oh man, now I got to give him his glorious mane.
Oh my god, I just saw squalls.
It's good, isn't it?
That's a word.
Oh, is it now? Okay.
Shut up, Steve. You're fired. What's our time at?
Sorry.
Oh, I started looking up his YouTube channel. 220.
220. Like left or that way?
Like left.
Oh God.
You only have a head.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. I spent a little too much time on the box set. Quick, someone give me a television series.
On Blu-ray though, it has to be on Blu-ray.
Okay, I know, I got it. So much of my my ability to draw fast comes from me desperately trying to match Shinji Nishikawa, who is actually he's a friend of mine, but he was the designer of Godzilla 2000 and all of the Godzilla movies from 1989 to 2004.
Oh my god, those are huge claws.
What do you expect?
Proportional claws? I don't know.
He's compensating for the lack of special features on his Blu-ray set.
I mean, are you where are you at now?
I'm just finishing up the background decor.
Oh, you're doing a background. Oh, Mr. Fancy Man.
All right, that's time. Okay. So.
Okay, Jesus.
All right, Matt. Since you're the guest, I will let you show off your second-rate work first.
May I?
So,
how very generous of you.
We are looking for a lion with the body of a Blu-ray box set of a TV show, and your modifier is works part-time at a fast food chain. What do you got?
All right, so here he is. It's the friends set, and he's got his fries, delicious French fries. He's got his name tag which says Kyle. His name is Kyle, and I managed to squeeze one building in there before it was time. So.
Oh,
that's Kyle the lion box friolator. Kyle the friolator. Kyleator. Oh man.
My God. Well,
yeah. Let me see.
I don't want to show mine anymore.
Which one where your mouth is?
Well, mine didn't come with a name, but I was supposed to do a lion with the body of a Blu-ray box set of a TV show with crab claws. So I have my kaiju right here, and instead of giving him a bottom or any legs, he levitates and hovers, and he puts out these little pulses that crush everything below him.
I like how yours like has attacks. Mine is just trying to make it to the next paycheck.
It's attacking that work shift, and it's got the body of Quantum Leap on Blu-ray.
Oh, Quantum Leap is good. I went with Friends, but I couldn't remember how the Friends box set looks like, so I just drew a couch.
Close enough. You know what? I'll give this one to you on this time.
Oh, how very generous of you.
Oh my god.
I liked yours. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be totally honest. This might be a bit of a move. Yours is actually better than I expected. It's actually...
Awesome. Well, hey, don't go anywhere, you guys. We will be right back. But before we do, if you guys want to get a chance to win this drawing, either Matt's or my very own, we will have the information on the screen right here where you can do that. But we're probably going to do that on Twitter. All right, we'll be right back. Oh my god, I can't believe how good yours looks.
That is insane.
With Godzilla being such a serious kind of art house picture at the time, and then becoming this groundbreaking success that, you know, would travel international, it would inspire all these other artists to make newer projects, you know, like whether it's under the Toho name, whether it would later become under the Toho name. What do you overall think of like the Godzilla sort of history, like the timeline? Because it does get a little goofier, like having only seen like the 98 Godzilla, which if you haven't seen it, it's interesting. It is definitely not Godzilla, but it is fun and it is weird, and it's just when you see the first one and you see that one, and then you see like baby Godzilla and like another one of the pictures in the middle, you're like, how did this develop? Where did this get to here and then to here? And you know,
that's an interesting question, because the franchise as a whole is you can if you just watch the Japanese films, which there are 35, I believe, it gets a little sticky as to what counts as part of that, because you have like the entire Toho cycle, and then you have like the American films. The 3 American films have been made, with the 4th one coming out this year, and then you have the 3 animated films on Netflix. Right. You can kind of trace the socioeconomic state of Japan depending on which Godzilla movie you're watching.
Yeah.
And it's just very interesting to consider that, because personally, I mean, it's a franchise that changes with the times, and I feel like that's true for any franchise. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You know, sometimes they try to take a new angle with it, and it doesn't quite stick the landing.
Sure.
Which is fine, you know, like they'll, like, for example, one of the most effective green movement, anti-pollution films ever made is Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster from, I want to say 1970, maybe it was 71. And that film is like, it's kind of a goofy kids movie, but the way they present pollution as this unflinchingly horrible thing. I mean, the monster in that movie, Hedorah, there's a scene where Hedorah transforms into a flying form and flies over Tokyo, and there are people who get caught up in the fumes that it spews out. They choke and die, and then the sulfuric acid melts the skin off their bones, and there's just piles of bones around Tokyo. It's a nightmare. It's just a nightmare. It speaks to the strength of the brand that even after the 1998 film, which the 1998 film, while I don't think it's necessarily a terrible or unwatchable film, it's hard to argue that it didn't do long-term damage to the franchise because it was so poorly received. There were actually, after 1998, Toho rushed into production of Millennium series.
Was it the Godzilla 2000?
Godzilla 2000, that's right. And the Millennium series, while there's some good stuff in there, it all the whole thing kind of stinks of this desperation to try to stay relevant. But it didn't really work out because the Millennium series wound up having a lot of really poor box office returns. And although GMK, the best of the Millennium series, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, it's a hell of a title. That's my favorite Godzilla movie. That one is really, really, really good. That is the best Godzilla sequel, I think, out of the whole franchise, after 54. But beyond that, a lot of Americans suddenly got cold feet when it came to the monster genre. A lot of proposed monster reboots and remakes were scrapped. Every time they tried to do a new Godzilla remake in America, it actually would get shot down because they were like, well, nobody wants Godzilla.
Right.
So, but here we are now. We have this monster verse happening with Legendary. King of the Monsters did okay at the box office. Like, it didn't do stellar, and it was considered a disappointment because they were expecting like Avenger style numbers, which you're not gonna get.
I think what would be really cool for sort of what you see like with a lot of tokusatsu that's famous and popular now is it went from something like Ultra Q, Ultraman, which is super expensive, super crazy, like logistic wise in the 60s, to think like, how do we do this? How do we make this? To making something like Kamen Rider or Go Ranger, which is a very almost independent version of that. Like, it's a very cheaper produced thing that still, because the artists that were working on it had such heart and compassion, it became, kind of this worldwide thing in its own right. I feel with like the Godzilla films, with like kind of all of the technology, that these films look amazing. These films, like you can sit there and watch it and it's like, you think of like Godzilla 98 and where we've come in 20 years time to get this film and how good it looks. Once that becomes sort of, I don't know, like open up for everybody else, like other independent filmmakers have the ability to make movies that look this good for cheap, we're going to get a really good set of just pretty much every kaiju film you could think of, because anybody with a half good idea is going to get it produced.
No. That's actually really interesting you say that, because a buddy of mine, Daisuke Sato, he was a special effects artist who worked on at least one of, if not, I think he worked on a couple of the Gamera movies for Daiei and Kadokawa, and he just this year premiered his crowdfunded kaiju film called A Howl from Beyond the Fog. It's an independent kaiju film with like this. It's all done with practical effects. It's a mix of traditional suitmation kaiju stuff and bunraku style Japanese puppetry, and it's a beautiful and very delicate film, and I highly recommend it. I'm just not sure if or when he's going to make it available to the public. Yeah, Godzilla and other media is always, it's this giant pop culture juggernaut, so it's natural that they would diversify and try to plug it into other media. Some of the first Godzilla merchandise outside of the film and maybe the posters, like if you could get a hold of a poster that a theater, collecting posters wasn't really a thing at the time, but some of the first Godzilla merchandise was actually comics, was manga that they would publish in like magazines and stuff. And they were just adaptations of the films, and they did that for Godzilla, they did it for Rodan, they did it for Mothra. And on top of that, you have all the great action figures, as you might be able to tell. And, you've got the video games have always been kind of interesting. I actually did a panel recently at PAX South in San Antonio where we just talked about the history of Godzilla video games. And that panel was a lot of fun because you get to see how weird Godzilla video games are, in that they're so like like you can't just make a game where a monster punches another monster. It has to be this convoluted nonsense of like, well, this Godzilla game has you controlling the military. It's like a chessboard. You have to set up the military in strategic positions to try to stop Godzilla.
Right.
Or this Godzilla game is a point-and-click adventure game on Monster Island, and this Godzilla game is a digital trading card game. And only every now and then would you just get a straightforward, like, in this game, you're Godzilla and you're fighting other monsters. Like, right. And that's surprisingly, I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's not as frequent as you would think. But I guess boomerang back around to comics, if you wanted to talk about that. I mean, I might know a thing or two about Godzilla comics.
Yeah. I mean, have you've read a Godzilla comic before?
I've read a Godzilla comic or two. My first comics I read as a kid were Godzilla comics. I still have my Dark Horse Godzilla comics and my Marvel Godzilla comics, which were the first companies to have it here in the States. Mm-hmm. And then in 2010, when IDW got the license, I already been working with them a little bit on Transformers stuff. And when Godzilla came along, I sent panicked emails to their editor, basically being like, "Hey, you remember me? If I don't get this job, I'll literally die." And they were like, "Oh yeah, Matt, we were gonna ask you anyway. I mean, our like creative consultant on the Godzilla comics knows you, so yeah." So they brought me in, and the first thing I did for them was I drew Godzilla's foot crushing a comic book store. And the way it worked was that if your store ordered like 500 or so copies mm-hmm. of the comic, they would they would destroy your store. Basically, we got like 75 different stores, and we had like 2.5-3 weeks to do all those covers. Wow. So they took my foot, and I essentially gathered together this group of artists who were basically working around the clock mm-hmm. to like, I drew like 20 of the stores, I think. Mm-hmm. And then I spread the rest out amongst like 5 or 6 other artists. Actually more than that, way more than that. Because we also had colorists, and that was a grand old time. And, you know, IDW was so impressed with how the job went down and how quickly I was able to turn this stuff around that they brought me back to do a bunch of other Godzilla stuff. But anyway, I went on from there, and I did Godzilla Legends, I did Godzilla Rules of Earth, I did Godzilla Rage Across Time, I did a cover for Godzilla in Hell, I did a cover for Godzilla's Gangsters and Goliaths, and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, so I did a lot of Godzilla.
It's just like, it's crazy to kind of think about like everything that's out there. There's just so much to it. Like with a lot of tokusatsu, it's like, I want to watch this season. Okay, to watch that season, but like with Godzilla, it feels like you almost need to like carry around like an encyclopedia almost. Flip to page 44 to figure out who this monster is. You know, Ultraman feels like that a little bit, but
Ultraman definitely feels like that a lot of it.
I feel like I need to reevaluate it. I need to go back and look at everything.
I mean, I definitely get what you're saying. Like, I did the same thing. You know, I found out about Godzilla, then I found out about Ultraman, then Power Rangers came along, and I found out about Sentai, and I found out about Kamen Rider and all that. Mm-hmm. But Godzilla, for me, never really left. Like, I was always low-key, like, it was always about Godzilla on some level for me. I mean, I recently reconnected with an old friend from high school, and he was like, I don't know, man, back when I knew you were all about manga and anime. And I'm like, yeah, on the surface, that's just because I wanted to look cool.
I hide my other stuff away.
There's nothing cooler, kids, than an American anime fan. Anyway, but it's just very interesting because like Godzilla is so multi-generational at this point. Like, I do G-Fest every year, which is the annual Godzilla convention in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And that convention has like 3 generations of fans at it. Like, there are grandparents there, their kids, and their grandkids. Like, that's the kind of show it is.
Uh-huh. Dang. I might have to check that out for Let's Talk Toku.
Go ahead.
Awesome. If you had to, just quickly before we end here, if you had to I don't know, give the highest praise to a single Godzilla film, like if you are a new fan who wants to get into Godzilla, what would be the perfect starter film other than the original 54 film? What do you think would be the best one to kind of jump in on?
So that's a very difficult question, because Godzilla, I think, only gets better with age, and the more you go through the franchise and the more you know about it, the more you appreciate it. But I can't really give a one singular, because my usual go-to is GMK, is Giant Monsters All Out Attack, because it's just, I think it's the best of the sequels, and it's directed by Shusuke Kaneko, and it's again director of the Gamera trilogy. It's just so supremely well done, and Godzilla is genuinely kind of scary in it. If I were to give like what a lot of fans like to do is like a top 5.
Sure.
Like, these are the Godzilla movies you need to watch.
Yeah, give me your top 5.
So there's the original. There's Mothra versus Godzilla, the first time he fights Mothra. There's King Kong versus Godzilla, but only the Japanese version. The American version isn't as good because they cut out a lot of it. The Japanese version is a comedy. It's like borderline a Mel Brooks comedy.
Yeah, he like shoves a tree down his throat at one point, right?
Yeah, like the monsters are intentionally very goofy, but there's also a lot of lampooning of the Japanese entertainment industry as well.
Awesome.
Like, it's very self-aware. Then I would have to say GMK, and then I'd have to say Shin Godzilla.
Okay.
Like, those are my top 5 for recommendation. I could sprinkle some others in there, like no, I think I'm gonna go with those 5, because I mean, there's also stuff like Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, which is really fun, and then there's the other Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and then there's the 2 other Godzilla vs. Mechagodzillas, and you know, and then there's the American films are also like, if you have a hard time getting through the barrier that is the dubs and subtitles, miniatures and rubber suits and stuff, which personally I prefer, but I understand that sometimes it's easier for people to digest a movie that's made in a more American style if they're, you know, used to just American films.
If their imagination isn't up to snuff.
You know what? Honestly, that's what it is.
Yeah.
If you can't suspend your disbelief enough to watch a Japanese miniature rubber suit Godzilla movie, then I guess watch the American movies or whatever. Shin Godzilla, though, is pretty advanced. Like, it's an all CG Godzilla, CG motion capture Godzilla. So it looks pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on our show. I hope you had fun.
I did.
I hope everybody enjoyed. I'd love to have you back on the show. Like, if we ever do any like sort of like other kind of kaiju kind of centric thing, or any other topics that, you know, you feel like you'd be well suited of, like maybe we'll do like a comic book episode, or maybe we'll see you at G-Fest.
You will definitely see me at G-Fest. I will always do my level best to be at G-Fest.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you everybody for watching Let's Talk Toku. We will see you guys next episode. Bye.